Good afternoon and welcome to You and Your Business with me, Alec Drew, on 103.2 Dublin City FM. Each week I invite an expert from the world of business to share their knowledge, insights and tips to help you with your particular business challenges. If there's a topic you would like discussed, or if you feel that you can make a contribution, please email me at yourbusiness@dublincityfm.ie and perhaps we'll be chatting here one day soon. My guest today is a well-being, resilience and performance expert. He's helped thousands of individuals make positive changes in their lives over the past 2 decades, and he's run 2 24-hour, 100-mile ultramarathons. I'm delighted to welcome George Anderson to the Junior Business Studio. Hey, George.
Thanks, Alec. Really good to be here.
My goodness, there's a lot in that, these marathons. I'll get around to talking about that in a minute, but I'm afraid you're going to be dragged back to doing something you haven't probably thought about, and that's your sort of last year in school and how that was for you.
So yeah, my last year of school, I had a great school career. I absolutely thrived in that environment. I was at a boarding school when I went there when I was 10 years old. And so by the time I got to 18, I was about to leave. I made it all the way to the heady heights of head boy, head of the house. So, you know, I was very, very comfortable in my final year of school, and I was heading off to university. And I guess really you make those decisions the year before. So my last year of school really was about just that transition from school and enjoying everything that environment had to offer, and getting myself ready to move on to the wonderful world of higher education.
All right. Just as an aside, I'm interested because not everybody sort of survives very much at boarding school. I'm just wondering, what do you think were the key elements that made it such a good place for you?
I don't know. I think acting a fool probably was very helpful. It's, you know, what's funny, because I look back on it now, and have done for the last 20 odd years. As I look back, it's not all rose tinted spectacles, because I know that there were times, especially my first year, I was literally just turned 10, and now my son is 10. He's just turned 10, and I look at that and think, wow, my goodness, I went to, I was left in a different country by my parents. They were living in Germany at the time, and this is down in the deepest, darkest Somerset in the southwest of the UK, and thinking, wow, that was tough. And it was. I remember struggling. I really do. And my overall overriding memories of school are one of very positive, but I know that I missed my parents, my home terribly in those early days. And so I had to figure out pretty quickly what I was going to do if I was going to not just survive this, but really thrive in that environment. And I realized that, if you can make people laugh, whether that's just by being funny or just doing dumb stuff, then people, they're quite accepting, and they're willing to, allow you to join their groups, and they'll give you some attention. So that was one of my number one things: just do daft stuff.
It's amazing, actually. It's a real test for you, at that sort of age, and then moving right the way through it. But for those who seem to come through it, come out as much stronger people.
Yeah, I definitely think it's probably different now, but back then there was definitely an element of sink or swim. And, I had a great group of friends, and I grew up with them through the age of 10, 11, 12 years old and onwards. And I'm still good friends with many of them even today. And I think that, you figure it out. You figure out a way to make it work. And especially when you're a boarder, you're in a very, very different environment. And it's also very easy to go the other way and to struggle and to not feel like you fit in. And I look back now at some of the episodes and some of the things that happened. I think, my goodness, there were some children who suffered terribly, both in my year, the years above, the years below, and it's a wonderful and enriching environment. So many opportunities, and I wouldn't have had it any other way. But I do know that it could have been and was tough for many. And I think that it's definitely not, I wouldn't off the back of that say, right, I had a great time at boarding school, therefore I'll send my kids to boarding school. I think it depends on the individual very much.
Yeah, no, that's fair play. So anyway, you had a penchant for maths and physics. Was that it? Was that your sort of?
Well, maybe penchant's a strong word, but I actually, no, it's fair. I did enjoy and do still enjoy maths. I'm a bit of a geek at heart. And I did them to A-level along with business studies. And it's almost like when you're 15 years old, someone says to you, hey, George, what do you want to do with the rest of your life? Because that's when you're making your GCSE decisions, which are going to inform your A-level choices, which is maybe at my school, it was normal to go on to university. So what you did at A-level was going to inform what you did at university. So I was doing maths and physics A-level and doing pretty well with them, got some good grades. And that got me into Loughborough University to study a master's degree in automotive engineering. And I have to confess, when we were looking through the UCAS book for which degrees we could put our names down for, we wanted to go for, I was looking for the ones that would give me the longest period of time for I to make any real decisions about what I want to do with the rest of my life. So I found a course that was 5 years, including a year in the middle, because it was a master's. And that's the one I got into at Loughborough. And again, went on and had a whale of a time.
Yes, I thought it was quite interesting that you should find yourself in automotive engineering when, in fact, you were keen at driving from a very young age, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, a real car nut, me. Yeah, absolutely. No, I didn't actually. It was always a running joke in my department that I couldn't drive. I'd never driven a car. In fact, I'd never even sat in the driving seat of a car until a couple of years after I graduated. In fact, no, that's a lie. There was one occasion where we were doing a vehicle test day at a place called Myra, and it was a kind of a big week of testing. You go back and analyze the data and so on. And I had to sit in the driving seat in a stationary car. We had to depress the brake pedal, and then they were measuring what the forces were on the calipers. It really was that tedious. And I had to ask somebody which one the brake pedal was. I had no idea. They said, which one is it? So we're in the middle. Okay, great.
Well, I'm sure that made a big impression, all right. Yeah. In terms of taking on a topic like this, and let's say you took it on for different reasons than maybe it was introduced into college, but how did you manage your way through that? Because it'd be very easy to find yourself, just throwing your eyes to heaven and sort of meandering your way through it.
No, I'm not kidding when I say I enjoy maths and physics. And I think the reason why I'm so drawn to it, because I love the purity of the binary nature of it. It's either right or it's wrong. And one thing I'm very good at is sitting down and just doing the work. I can work through the theory. I can work through questions. I can figure things out. And my brain does work quite analytically, and I get a real buzz out of doing that. So really, I had a real sense of intrinsic motivation throughout my time at Loughborough. However, when it came to coursework and applying the theory to the real world, where things aren't binary, things don't work the way they should work, that's where I started to struggle, because it was frustrating and I couldn't figure out why they weren't working, or if I could, I wasn't interested in it. So I got through it because I enjoyed the theory, but when it came to the practical, which is kind of the opposite of what most people think. I think most people like the practical, and a lot of people joined that particular degree because they thought they'd just be spending all their time tinkering around with car engines under the bonnet. But we didn't even look at a car engine until halfway through the second year. So a lot of calculus, a lot of maths, a lot of aerodynamics and thermodynamics and all that stuff that even now when I'm thinking about, I used to love all that theoretically, but I can never quite seem to translate it to reality. And that's when I knew as well, Alec, that, I could sit down and I do maths equations and puzzles all day long, but I'm not an engineer. This isn't my calling.
Well, the great news for most people, certainly over the last couple of decades, is the ability, every time, just to shift on to something you want to do. And so therefore you did, having come out, there were jobs available, but what did you decide to do?
Well, I knew in my year out, when I worked as a mechanical test engineer, that this wasn't going to be the calling for me. That's when I made the decision. I still had 2 more years to go to finish off the master's. And it's not like doing a BEng, a Bachelor of Engineering, where you finish a 4 or 3 year course, you get a degree, and then you go on and do an MSc as a final year. With mine, at the end of 4 years, I still had no additional qualifications to show for my efforts. So I was committed at that point to go for the full 5 years. But over the course of those last 2 years, I decided I was at Loughborough, which is a very sporty college, sporty university. Right. I was running 400 meters on the track, and I got into gym instructing. I went and did my gym instructing qualifications and got a job at the center as a gym instructor and a class instructor. So during that time, when I realized that engineering probably isn't going to be for me, despite a couple of half-hearted attempts at getting my CV in front of a couple of potential employers, I knew that it wasn't for me. So I decided I was going to go into personal training. I was going to start running a fitness business. And that was a very loose idea that I had during that last year of university. But it's the direction that I decided to take in the end.
This is what I love about these sort of interviews. There's somebody who now spent 5 years learning the whole skills and crafts around automotive engineering, has decided to head off and be a gym instructor.
You know what, I did try and, you know, in defense as well, in honor of my mum and dad who'd financed me through 5 years of university, I described it as body engineering.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, 5 years. I'm really using that degree to understand about engineering, about how the human body works.
Well, it probably takes the same mindset, really.
Yeah, and that was always my thing as well. People were often said, "Oh, at least you've got your engineering to fall back on." But I've never lived my life thinking or hoping that knowing that I've got something to fall back on. It's like I don't have a plan B. I just want to go and this is what I want to do. I don't want to live a half-hearted life like that. So I went into it knowing that I was going to make this work some way. But there were plenty of other skills and characteristics that I developed through my time at university. The mindset, the discipline, the grit it takes to just keep on going and to see something through to the end. And you know, that side and the friendships that I forged through that time as well, and my own understanding of myself as I grew up in those 5 years, really did set my stall out for how I wanted to be in the professional world, even if it was as a personal trainer and not as an engineer.
Of course, this sort of sense of entrepreneurship came to you at quite a young age, if I remember you telling me.
Yeah, so as I said, I was at boarding school, and if there's one thing you can guarantee in a boarding house full of boys is that there's going to be they're going to get hungry, and there is a school tuck shop, but that's all the way over the other side of the school. So I decided I was going to capitalize on the laziness of the local captive audience, and I was going to start my own tuck shop. And I'd go down to the local co-op and I'd buy those. You get those packs of chocolate bars, like packs of Mars bars, buy 4 get 1 free. Well, that free one, that was worth 25 pence to me back in the day. So I'd bring them back, I'd strip them out, and I'd sell them. And not only did I make a little bit of profit on that, I was the only game in town that gave credit. So I had a whole line of credit. I knew which boys had how much allowance they had coming in each month, so how much credit I could allow them. I had a whole thing going on. I ran that from the age of 11 right up to when I left at 18.
So a combination of retailing and retail banking. So I love that.
Yeah, and of course, you know, I also feel like I spent the first half of that my career there, well, first 8 years rather, creating the problem. I was selling cans of Coke and crisps and chocolate bars, and then the next 10 years helping people get over their habit of eating too much Coke and chocolate bars.
So what you did was create a problem that you would then have to solve and get paid for.
Actual job, Alec, was working in Burger King as well. Brilliant.
I love it. It's amazing when I speak with people like this, the stories that come out, you know, and it's often when they reflect themselves, they start laughing and thinking, I can't believe I did that. You know? So anyway, the gym side took a far more sort of serious turn for you in terms of you got involved in half marathons. Tell me more about that and what that experience and what that brought you.
Well, I'd always been a runner, as I mentioned at Loughborough. I was a 400 runner. But I came to university as a distance runner, as a 800, 1500 on the track and cross country. So I was never a sprinter, but I just loved the training and the camaraderie of pushing yourself around in one lap. But when I left, I went back to the longer stuff. So I got back into 10Ks and eventually half marathons. And in Reading is the home of one of the UK's biggest half marathons. At the time, I think it was the second biggest in the country. And so I got in touch with the organisers, a company called The Sweatshop, and they then took me on as the training partner. So as the training partner, I delivered the warm-up at the beginning of the event. I organised a team of pacemakers to help people through in their target times. And I did that for the next 14 or 15 years. And it really opened me up to a lot of other opportunities and potential to see, well, I don't want to be just a gym instructor. That means to be disparaging to gym instructors, but I knew that I didn't want to just be in a gym. And I was a personal trainer then as well. So there's all these other things I was doing inside, but I wanted to expand my reach and my audience, and I wanted to have a positive impact on more people's lives. And so partnering with the Running Half Marathon all those years was a really, really powerful way for me to do that.
It must have introduced a whole set of new skills for you to have to upskill yourself with and develop.
Yeah, it was great. It sort of forced me into creating running training programs and sort of decided, you know what, I'm going to identify now as the running guy. So I became a running coach. A lot of my coaching clients were runners as well. I was doing a lot of running at the time. And I was also running a business over in Ireland called runrepublic.ie. And in that was back in the sort of mid 2000s. It was actually quite difficult to get running gear over in Ireland. And I know that because my sister lives over there, over in Galway, and she'd get me to buy it from the UK and then send it over to her because it was cheaper to do that than it was for her to buy it herself. Right. So we decided that we were going to set up a running clothing business, and I had a couple of contacts in the world of running retail clothing, and so we just started doing it. I created a website talking about upskilling. I had to learn how to write HTML and CSS. My engineering head back on again. I wouldn't have to do that these days with WordPress and the like, but I did it, and I created this website. And although we never really turned the business into what it potentially could have been, we just didn't have the resources to keep pushing more and more advertising to try and convince runners in Ireland at the time it was okay to run a marathon wearing your rugby or your GAA top and have bleeding nipples at the end. That was okay. It's just the way we do it. so why would I want to pay 20 pounds, 20 euros for a running top? It's crazy. And of course, over the next few years, that all changed. So we folded that, but I maintained the website. And one of the other things we had with the site was we were collecting email addresses, and I was sending out an informative training and wellbeing newsletter. So this must be going back to 12 years or so ago now that I started doing that. And I'm still, in one form or another, I'm still doing that exact same thing now, sending out emails to my mailing list, which started off with runrepublic.ie.
Just while I think of it now, would you like to tell our listeners where they may hear more about you, your website? And
yeah, sure. Well, don't go to Run Republic because that's not my domain anymore. I don't know what that is.
Right.
With me. But my website is bygeorgeanderson.com. And I'm a coach, I'm a speaker, I'm an author. I wrote a beginner's guide to journaling, which published a couple of months ago. And that's the best place to connect with me and find out more about the things that I'm into. Fantastic.
So you started collecting names, you started building a database. Again, you found a new way to sort of contact people. What was that to lead on to for you?
Well, I realized after a few months of doing this, after we'd folded the business, that there was really no end game with this. There wasn't really a purpose other than I enjoyed sharing my content and my ideas. And then something came to me about putting on a running workshop. And I remember sitting in a coffee shop. I like to. One of the things I've struggled with the lockdowns and the restrictions, Alec, is just being in the same place. I work really well if I can go to different locations and get this kind of creative thinking time. And I had this one amazing coffee shop in Reading. It was like an independent place, beautiful coffee. I remember sitting in that place one day with mind mapping this out, thinking, like, what can I do? I've got this database of a few thousand names and email addresses. They're opening my mails. They're interested in it. But what am I doing? Where am I going with this? And I had this idea of putting on this running workshop. And there and then I just got on the website, on the database, and I emailed them and said, look, I'm thinking of doing this. Who thinks they might be interested in doing a session in Dublin? And I was inundated with positive responses very, very quickly. So within the next 7 days, I put a web page together, put a sales process together, and created my first ever running workshop, which was over in Dublin. I think it was back in 2008 or 9. I think that must have been.
Right. So obviously what you were sending out in the newsletter was certainly drawing the crowd in. So what skills did you to learn to turn this into an event?
Well, I really discovered that I enjoyed writing. I enjoyed that form of communication. And I was already at that point as well lecturing on personal training courses. So I've been a PT for a few years now. And I'd applied for a part-time role as a lecturer and a tutor and an assessor in the fitness industry. So I was doing that, and I was enjoying being in front of a classroom teaching for a day as well. And so I thought, there's got to be some way of combining this love of wanting to share my knowledge and being in a room in that moment with a group of people and getting that energy from the group. I mean, you're a professional speaker, you know what it's like. There's nothing quite like that buzz that you get when you see the reactions from people, and that aha moment when things just click and the excitement that builds. Right, this is what I'm going to do with that. And so after that first workshop, I knew that wasn't going to be the last one. And I decided I was going to do a bit of a tour. So I put on a number of workshops all around Ireland, Galway, Limerick, and Cork, and more in Dublin, and also around the UK, specifically in Reading, because that's where I had my biggest database through the Reading Half Marathon. And it really taught me how to communicate ideas in a workshop setting, in a group setting, how the sum of the parts is, the whole of the parts is greater than the sum of the parts. So you can get everyone together in a room like that. And actually, it's so much more enriching compared with just me telling somebody what to do on a one-to-one basis. People are helping each other out as well. And I really fell in love with that process, which is why a lot more of my business now has evolved towards public speaking, professional speaking, working with groups, working with organizations, even though now it's all on the virtual platforms.
Yes, of course. For most people, standing up in front of an audience and speaking is quite a daunting task. How did you overcome that for yourself? You don't seem to lack confidence, but that's not always the way to get through it. So there's obviously a skill set that you had to develop behind it.
Yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it? Because you can be confident with your material, you can be confident with in your own skin and who you are and the impact that you want to have, but you can still stand or be preparing to go in front of an audience, whether it's virtual or in real life, and still feel that tingling, that nervousness, that apprehension, and that little voice of doubt that's niggling and nagging away there, saying, they're not going to like this, you're not going to be good enough, not as good as the last speaker, or they're going to ask for the money back. And so a big part of what I teach when I'm coaching or when I'm delivering content, and what I've had to learn myself is to accept that those voices are always going to be there, but that you don't have to listen to them. And I think the moment we tell ourselves, when you hear those voices, that means that this ain't for me, the nerves are too bad, I can't go on, I can't do this, then we shut ourselves off to opportunities to learn. And it's about breaking through to the other side, just accepting it, letting it be, breathing through it. So there's some fairly straightforward sort of physical things that you can do to help calm those nerves and to bring it back to focus. And then to actually still be able to step out onto a stage and thoroughly enjoy yourself and immerse yourself in your own content and the impact that you're hoping that it's going to have on the audience.
And what you've identified there is a very important thing, and this is about change and the ability for those who want to succeed to be able to step into change and embrace it, even though it's quite scary.
Yeah, not everyone's ready for it. Not everyone is conscious enough to identify that this is something that they even capable of changing. And I think, that's a shame. And I do my very best to spread the good word and to talk about, wherever you're at, there's always an opportunity to make incremental improvements and change if you want to. But I'm also a believer that you can't, you need to allow people to reach that conclusion by themselves. People need to be ready to explore this with an open mind, and to actually start just that little chink of belief there that, okay, maybe there is a way that I can overcome this. And maybe that discomfort, that pain, that uncertainty about this, maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's actually an indication that I'm moving in the right direction.
I mean, for somebody like yourself who loves the buzz of standing up on stage in front of an audience like I do, how have you managed since the sort of COVID lockdown and re-lockdown and all of these things that are happening?
Yeah, well, you know what? I've been on a personal goal for the last almost 3 years now, or probably over 3 years actually, to really establish myself in the professional speaking world. And the last 6 months have been actually a really fantastic opportunity for me. It's been tough. It's been challenging. I've really missed being up there on a real stage, but at the same time, it's opened up a lot more opportunities. And because I speak about well-being, resilience, mental health, performance, how to thrive when working from home, these are all areas that I have expertise in, and I have been teaching over the last 6-7 months, it just so happens that they are now really coming into their own. Companies, more and more companies are recognizing that this isn't just a nice to have, this is an essential if they want their employees and the organization as a whole to really thrive through these challenging times. So it's been really an expansive time for my speaking business, for sure.
What are the big issues that you're finding with organizations at the moment? I mean, they're having to embrace the changes that are happening, but also understanding supports that they need. What are the key supports you think they need mostly at the moment?
I think one of the biggest challenges that companies are facing is scrabbling to find a solution, whether it's from an external source or brought internally, that fits and works for everybody. I think when this first happened and we all went into lockdown, there was a big thing about isolation, and we're going to be, we're not going to be connecting with our peers. And although we are social animals and we do all need some kind of connection there, we all need it in different ways. I think a lot of companies really jumped on this and were like, right, everyone's going to be getting on Zoom calls and virtual coffee hours and having a virtual pub at the end of the week, and which is brilliant to see that they were making that effort. But actually, not everybody. That was quite uncomfortable for a lot of people. Is the feedback that I've had, and not everybody wanted to engage like that. They were actually quite happy, especially more introverted people were more happy to just actually, this is great. I can just get on with my work now. I'm not going to be disturbed all the while, or have to try and pretend I'm somebody that I'm not, and they just get on with their work. And I think now companies are finding that balance and have opened up a much better dialogue with their teams, with employees, especially as some have come back into the office and now going back into lockdown again to work from home. And I think more companies, certainly in the conversations that I've had, have been getting more on top of the individual requirements of their workforce, and just making sure that those support networks are in place.
As somebody in that area, what sort of advice would you give to business owners at the moment in relation to sort of health and well-being for themselves personally, as well as maybe for their organizations?
One of the greatest things that's come out of this, I think, Alec, is the greater readiness that people have, men in particular, male leaders in particular, have to talk about how they're feeling. And actually the fact that maybe they're struggling as well, and to not see it as a sign of weakness. Sure. And I think that's to be encouraged to do it in a safe and in a forum, in a format that actually doesn't start to degrade confidence in the senior leadership teams. I think there's a fine line there, but at the same time say, look, we're all got our own stuff going on. We're all bringing our own stuff from home, from our personal lives, and now we've got this to deal with as well. There ain't nobody who's going to be getting through this without having at least to make some adaptations and changes. I've struggled with this. I mean, me personally speaking now, I had a bit of a wobble around that time where I was really starting to engage from work and starting to struggle. And that's why I realized I had to really step up my own game with things like journaling and meditation. All my own personal well-being habits had to really level up. And I had to take a lot more strategic recovery to ensure that I was able to maintain the performance that I'd come to expect of myself. And I think that more companies, more individuals in the leadership teams in these companies are starting to realize the power, not just this will help us get through this, but actually there are advantages to being ready to talk about how you're feeling. And instead of brushing under the carpet or crushing it down, pretending it's not happening, and actually everyone's doing okay, or I'm doing okay, and we're just going to put on this facade. So it's actually, I think, accelerated that mental health conversation by a number of years over the last few months because of this.
Just in the last 30 seconds we got, tell our listeners a bit more about your journal that you've written and had out there now, and where they might find you.
I've been an avid journaler for a long time, and I wrote this over the last 2 years with a book coach friend of mine, Alexa Whitten, and it's called The Work in Progress, the WIP. The idea being that if you're maybe struggling to get into journaling, if you thought that sounds like a great idea but haven't really been able to get it off the ground, or don't really know where to start, then this is the perfect starting point for you. It's very much a let's get this going. Let's look at some different approaches and some different systems that we can use to get some of the many benefits that journaling has to offer. So you can go onto the website, mywhipjournal.com, or it's available through my main website, bygeorgeanderson.com as well.
What a great piece of advice to finish the show. A special thanks to our guest, George Anderson, for coming into the You and Your Business studio today. And thanks also to Sam on Sound. The podcast of today's show will be available on dublincityfm.ie from tomorrow. Thank you for your company. And please remember to join me, Alec Drew, again next week at the same time, 12:30, right here on another edition of You and Your Business. That's it. How's that?
Very good. Nice, relaxed conversation.